I should have left the second I saw the house. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe it was because I was tired, ready to be done for the night. Maybe it was because I had done this 100 times before. Or maybe, deep down, I just thought this kind of thing doesn't actually happen in real life. But it does. And it happened to me. It was almost midnight. My last delivery of the night. A double order, some burgers and fries from a 24-hour diner. The address was in a quiet neighborhood about 10 minutes from the city limits. Not isolated, not creepy. Just another house on another street. At least, that's what I thought. Until I got there. I pulled up to the curb, squinting at the GPS. The house was dark. No porch light. No glow from inside. It looked empty. I checked the app. Leave It door was not selected. I sighed. I hated knocking this late at night. But it was my last stop, then I was done. So I grabbed the food and stepped out of the car. The air was cold. Too cold for early fall. I walked up the stone path, my footsteps too loud in the silence. And just as I lifted my fist to knock, the door swung open. A man stood in the doorway. Tall. Thin. Wearing an old sweater and jeans. His face was pale, his hair messy. But the thing that struck me most? His expression. Not tired. Not annoyed. Just blank. Like he wasn't really there. I forced a polite smile. Hey, I've got your order. He didn't respond right away. Just stared at me. Then finally, he muttered, too soft, too flat. I don't have my wallet. I exhaled. This happens sometimes. People forgot their cash, ran to grab it. No big deal. But before I could say anything, he stepped aside and gestured inside the house. Come in, he said. Just for a second. I'll go get it. I hesitated. I never go inside. It's the first rule of delivery. But something about the way he said it. It wasn't a question. It was like he expected me to listen. Like he knew I would. I looked past him. The inside was dark. Only a faint yellow light from a room down the hall. Everything in me told me not to step inside. But then I glanced back at my car. At my phone sitting in the cup holder. And I thought, what's the worst that could happen? So I stepped in. And the moment I did it, the door swung shut behind me. The air inside was stale. Like a house that hadn't been lived in for a long time. I expected to hear a TV. A fan. Something. But it was silent. Too silent. Like the walls were holding their breath. The man gestured down the hall. I'll be right back, he muttered. And then he disappeared. Leaving me alone. In the middle of the dark house. Holding a bag of food that suddenly felt way too heavy. I shifted my weight, glancing around. The living room was bare. No decorations. No family pictures. Just a couch, a coffee table, and a single framed photograph sitting on the mantel. Something about it felt off. Like the kind of house you see in a real estate listing, staged, empty. Not lived in. And then, I heard footsteps. Not from the hall. From upstairs. I turned toward the stairs, my pulse quickening. I hadn't seen anyone else in the house. The man didn't say he had roommates. So who was up there? I took a slow step backward. Then another. I reached for my phone. Shit. It was still in the car. A voice called from upstairs. Soft. Muffled. Not the man's voice. A woman's. Hello? I swallowed hard. Was she talking to me? I looked toward the hallway, expecting the man to come back. But he didn't. And then the voice called again. Closer. Hello? Who's in my house? My stomach dropped. She didn't sound confused. She sounded terrified. Like she had just woken up to find a stranger in her home. And suddenly I knew it. Something was very wrong. The woman's voice echoed from upstairs. Hello? Who's in my house? She sounded scared. Confused. Like she had just woken up and wasn't expecting anyone to be here. And that's when it hit me. She didn't say who's downstairs. She said who's in my house? Like she thought she was alone. Like she didn't know about the man. The man who had just let me in. The man who had walked down the hall. The man who hadn't come back. A deep chill crawled up my spine. I turned toward the front door. My heart was pounding. Something wasn't right. Something was wrong. I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. The door wouldn't move. I twisted the lock, rattled the knob, shoved my shoulder against it. It was like it had been sealed shut. Like the house didn't want me to leave. I took a step back. Tried to breathe. There had to be another way out. A back door. A window. I turned back toward the hall. And stopped cold. Because at the end of the hallway, the man was standing there. He had changed. His posture was different. His shoulders were too stiff. His arms hung loose at his sides, unmoving. And his face. His face was wrong. The blank look was gone. Now he was smiling. A wide, too wide grin. Like he had just heard the punchline of a joke I didn't understand. And then, without blinking, without moving his lips, he spoke, in a voice that wasn't his. You shouldn't be here. I took a step back. Look, man, I just need to leave. He didn't move. Didn't blink. His smile stretched wider. Like it had been painted on. And then, in that same, flat voice. She's waking up. I felt ice in my veins. The woman upstairs. I glanced toward the staircase. I could hear movement now. Soft footsteps above me. A bed creaking. A door slowly opening. She was coming downstairs. And I had no idea who she was. No idea if she was like him. If she was worse. If she was even real. I turned back to the man. But he was gone. A door creaked above me. Then, footsteps. Slow. Cautious. Coming down the stairs. I took a step back into the living room. Heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to know. But then, she reached the bottom of the steps. And I saw her. She looked normal. Tired, confused, but normal. A woman in her late 40s, wrapped in a robe, hair messy from sleep. She looked at me, then at the front door. Then her face twisted in fear. What are you doing in my house? She whispered. Her voice was shaking. She wasn't like him. She was really scared. I put my hands up. I don't know, I stammered. Your husband, he let me in. He. Her face went pale. And then, in a hoarse whisper. My husband is dead. I froze. No, I whispered. I just saw him. He. My voice caught in my throat. Because suddenly I noticed something. The photographs on the wall. They hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. But now? Now the entire wall was covered in them. Framed family pictures. And in every single one. The man was smiling. That same too wide grin. The one I had just seen in the hallway. I staggered back. My mind was racing. This wasn't possible. I had just seen him. He was real. He was a soft whisper broke the silence. You shouldn't be here. I turned toward the woman. And my stomach twisted in horror. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking past me. Her face had gone pale. Her lips trembling. I knew before I even turned around. I knew. But I turned anyway. And he was right behind me. Still smiling. Still grinning too wide. And then, the lights went out. Darkness. Total, suffocating darkness. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. Couldn't see. And then, I felt it. A hand on my shoulder. Cold. Wrong. Fingers pressing too hard. Like it wanted to pull me somewhere else. Somewhere I didn't belong. I tried to scream. Tried to move. But the whisper came again. Right against my ear. You're staying. And then, I was falling. I was falling. Not downstairs. Not onto the floor. Into something else. Something too deep, too dark. Like the house itself had opened up beneath me. I tried to scream, but something cold pressed against my mouth. Something wet. Fingers. I was being pulled down. Dragged into the darkness. And just before I lost consciousness, I heard that voice. Too close. Too wrong. You're staying. I woke up gasping. Heart hammering. My body was aching. Cold. At first, I thought I was outside. The air felt thick, heavy, like a basement or a cave. But as my vision adjusted, I realized I was still in the house. Or, at least, what was left of it. The walls were rotting. The ceiling was too high now, stretched into shadows. And the floor? The floor was covered in something dark and wet. Something that smelled like rotting meat. I pushed myself up it. And my hand sank into the floor. Into something soft. Something moving. I jerked away. My breath caught in my throat. The floor wasn't wood anymore. It was flesh. I scrambled back, trying to stand it. And that's when I saw them. The walls. At first, they looked like cracked plaster. Like an old, abandoned house. But then, the cracks blinked. I let out a choked gasp. They weren't cracks. They were eyes. Dozens of them. Watching me. Buried inside the walls, inside the rotting flesh of the house. And then, I saw the mouths. Small, human mouths. Moving, muttering, whispering. I stepped closer, stomach twisting. And my breath caught in my throat. One of the faces in the wall. I recognized it. The man in the suit. Still smiling. Still watching. And in a voice that wasn't his anymore. He whispered. I told you. You're staying. I ran. Straight down the twisting, pulsing hallway. The walls shifted as I moved. Like they were breathing. Like they were alive. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew I had to get out. But then, I heard it. Something moving behind me. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Something wet. something dragging itself across the floor. I didn't look back. I kept running. But the sound got closer. Faster. Like something was crawling after me. And then, it grabbed my ankle. The fourth twist, the hand that wasn't human. I crashed onto the wet, pulsing floor. Pain shot up my leg. I tried to kick, to pull away. But the hand, it was wrong. The fingers were too long, too many. Gripping me like a vice. I screamed. Twisted, kicked harder. And then, for the first time, I saw what had been chasing me. It wasn't the man. It wasn't the woman. It was something else. Something that had never been human. A long, gray body. Arms that stretched like ropes. A face with no features, just a mouth. A wide, gaping hole of teeth. And from that horrible mouth, it whispered in the man's voice. Time to eat. I twisted, slamming my elbow into the thing's grip. It shrieked. A horrible, garbled sound. The walls around me twitched. The eyes blinked. The mouths groaned. And then, the floor split open. Not cracked. Not broken. Opened. Like a mouth. A deep black void beneath me. I could feel it pulling me down. Like the house was swallowing me whole. Like I had become part of it. And then, the thing let go. And I fell. Straight into the darkness. I don't know how long I was falling. Seconds. Minutes. Days. But when I woke up, I wasn't in the house anymore. I was in my car. The delivery bag was still in my lap. The address on my phone still on the screen. And the house? The house was gone. I gasped, shaking. My body ached. I looked at my hands, scraped, bruised, bloody. Like I had actually been there. Like it had actually happened. I turned the car on. The time? 12:17 a.m. The exact time I had arrived. Like none of it had happened. Like the house had never existed. But then just as I was about to drive away, I saw it. A new order notification popped up on my phone. A delivery request. From the same address. From a customer named Evan. And under special instructions. Just 2 words. Come inside. I should have ignored it. I should have just driven away. But when I saw the order pop up on my phone, the same address. The name Evan. The words come inside. I felt something twist inside me. Like a hook had been lodged in my ribs. Like the house knew I had escaped and it was trying to pull me back. I sat there, gripping the wheel, my breath coming out in short, uneven bursts. The house wasn't real. Or maybe it was and I had never actually left. The bruises on my arms real. The dirt under my nails real. The feeling that I was being watched. Too real. And then, my phone buzzed again. Another notification. Same order. Same address. And this time there was another message. We're waiting. I took a shaky breath. I needed to tell someone. Anyone. I grabbed my phone and dialed my manager. It rang once. Twice. Then a click. A voice answered. But it wasn't my manager. It was my own voice. You shouldn't be here. I slammed the phone down. Tried to call 911. But before the call even connected, a voice whispered through the speaker. Come back inside. And then static. I dropped the phone. My hands were shaking. I stared at the house or where the house should have been. But there was nothing. Just an empty lot. Like it had never been there at all. Like the house had only existed for me. And then, the street light above me flickered. And when it came back on, the house was there again. Standing exactly as I remembered. Like it had been waiting. And the front door? Wide open. I threw the car into reverse. I didn't care about the order. Didn't care if I lost my job. I just needed to get away. I sped through the neighborhood past the rows of quiet houses. But as I turned onto the main road, I felt my stomach drop. Because somehow, I was right back where I started. In front of the same house. The address glowing on my phone screen. Like I had never left. Like the streets had folded in on themselves to bring me back. And this time, there was someone standing in the doorway. At first, I thought it was the man from before. The one who had let me inside. But then I saw the uniform. The familiar dark jeans, the red delivery shirt. The name tag. My name tag. Evan, delivery driver. It was me. Standing on the porch. Looking right at me. And then, it smiled. A wide, too wide grin. And in my own voice, it whispered. You're late. I stomped on the gas. The tires screeched. The car lurched forward. But then a shadow moved in front of me. I slammed the brakes. And just before my headlights flickered out, I saw them. Standing in the yard. Dozens of them. People in delivery uniforms. All of them wearing my face. All of them smiling. And as my headlights flickered back on it, they were gone. But the porch light was still on. and my other self was still standing in the doorway. Still waiting. I threw the car into park. I knew what this was. I wasn't getting out of this. Not until I went back inside. Not until I faced whatever the house wanted me to see. I stepped out of the car. The air was thick, heavy. The sound of the wind vanished, like the whole world had been muted. I moved toward the front steps. And the other me? It just watched. Still smiling. Still grinning too wide. And as I stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind me. Like it had been waiting. Like it had never let me go. The house was different now. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. No family pictures. No signs that anyone had ever lived here. And yet, I could feel them. Watching. Waiting. I turned toward the hallway. And then, the lights flickered. And I saw them. Lined up against the walls. Figures in delivery uniforms. All of them identical to me. All of them smiling. And at the end of the hall, the man in the suit. Still grinning. Still waiting. And in a voice that sounded too much like mine, he whispered, "You're home." The man in the suit smiled. The delivery drivers. ***, all of them identical to me. ***, stood against the walls, their expressions empty and waiting. And at the end of the hallway, the man in the suit whispered, "You're home." I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in. I didn't want to be here. I never wanted to come back. And yet, I had. The house had made sure of that. I took a slow step backward, my chest tightening. "I'm not supposed to be here," I whispered. The man in the suit's grin widened. His voice was calm, certain. "But you are." Then he stepped forward, and every single copy of me turned their heads toward me at the same time. The air in the room went still, and I finally understood. This house had always been waiting for me. I turned toward the mirror hanging on the wall. It was old, warped with age. The glass was fogged, streaked with dust. But when I stepped closer, I saw something wrong. My reflection, it wasn't moving like me. It was smiling. Wide. Too wide. The same way the man in the suit smiled. The same way the other versions of me smiled. And then, my reflection lifted a hand, pressed it against the glass, and whispered, "Come inside." I staggered back. No, this wasn't real. This wasn't happening. I turned away from the mirror, but the reflection didn't. It just stood there, watching, waiting. And then, I felt something cold grip my wrist. I looked down, and my own hand was reaching out of the mirror, grabbing me, pulling me toward the glass. I screamed. I yanked my arm away. The mirror cracked. Hairline fractures spread across the surface. And then, a voice inside my head. "Clock out, Evan." The walls pulsed. The delivery drivers, ***, my copies, ***, took a step forward. And the man in the suit whispered, "The house takes what it's owed." Something moved beneath my feet. The floor shifted. I looked down. The wood was splitting apart. Beneath it, there wasn't a foundation. There was just blackness. A deep, endless void. And it was opening wider. Like a mouth. Like the house was hungry. And I was the meal. I ran. I didn't look back. Didn't stop. The front door was ahead, open. For the first time, it wasn't locked. It was letting me go. But that's when I realized. It wasn't letting me leave. It was letting something else go with me. I burst out onto the porch. Gasping. Sweating. The air outside felt too cold, too sharp. Like stepping out of a dream into the real world. I turned back. But the house was gone. Just an empty lot. Like it had never been there at all. Like it had never existed. And for a moment, I thought I was free. Until I saw the reflection in my car window. It wasn't me. Not really. It had my face. My uniform. My body. But the eyes. They were too dark. Too empty. And then, it smiled. The same too wide smile the man in the suit had. The same smile my copies had. And in my own voice, it whispered, "See you at work." Then, it was gone. I got back in my car. Drove away. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. Quit my job. Changed my number. Moved to another town. Tried to forget. And for a while I thought I had. Until one night my phone buzzed. A new order. A new address. And under special instructions. Just 2 words. Come inside.